All right, so the thing I want to finish with is this worry about utilitarianism and bad faith. The idea that utilitarianism has this problem that it can justify doing terrible things. And Mill has an answer to this. And you know, it's not a terrible answer. I also think it's not entirely satisfying. And Mill's basic response is this. Yes, this is a problem for utilitarianism that it seems like the theory can be used. In fact, it can be used to justify doing bad things. But Mill says, well, every moral theory is in this boat. Every moral theory is, in a sense, dangerous. Utilitarianism isn't especially bad off. And Mill will say, look, a scoundrel can justify using any moral theory to do terrible things, right? Mill cites in passing, look at the ways Christian doctrine has been misused, right? And he doesn't go into a lot of detail, but I think this is fairly informative, right? You know, Christian moral principles are things like love your neighbor as yourself, what you do unto the least of these you do to me. Um, you know, don't we'll argue, we'll talk a little bit more about warfare, but generally not big on violence. Those who live by the sword die by the sword, turn the other cheek. You have these very high-minded, very idealistic moral principles that are very much against violence, seem to embody kindness, and you look at the ways that people have used these in history, right? You know, the Spanish when they're colonizing the New World. Now, the reaction of the clergy was very mixed. Some of them actually did defend, the Native Americans, others not so much, but, definitely Christian doctrine was twisted to be like, well, it's perfectly fine to conquer this group because we're saving their souls. That's real Christian love, right? Or the way even worse, I just read a book on the Reformation and just so much of this, right? Well, these heretics are challenging the political order. Well, Christian love says we need to kill these people because, well, if we don't, they're going to lead more people astray. That will be terrible. Just bad for everyone. Christian love, you know, and we're giving the heretic himself a chance to recant. That's real love itself, right? Before we burn him alive if he doesn't. You know, on and on and on thing. And as somebody who counts himself a Christian, this is very depressing, right? And it's not just the Catholic side. As you have Martin Luther, very conveniently like he relies on the German princes for his support. Lo and behold, Luther thinks, well, Christian love actually means we need to kill these peasants who are causing all this problem, right? Murderous, thieving peasants. Christian love is we come in and we show these people what's what with the sword. Yeah, so I think Mill is right. You look at the way something as seemingly idealistic as the basic Christian commandment, love your neighbor as yourself, can be misused, the way it can be twisted by people to justify what's good for them. I think this is a general problem for moral theory. But I'm not sure this is an entirely satisfying response, right? Why not? Well, think of it this way. It is true that any moral theory can be misused and can be dangerous, but I think utilitarianism might be especially prone to misuse, especially dangerous, right? Look, I'll give you guys an example. Not to pick on my poor dad, but I will. My poor dad is not a guy who's ever been terribly safety conscious, right? And we would have these old tools at home. I still remember this one drill we had, the cord that was held together with like electrical tape. My dad would keep these old tools that were dangerous. And if you gave my dad a lecture about it, it's like, can you just buy a new drill, Dad? Can you get like You get a circuit, that's the guard seems to be off that saw. Could you get another one? That seems really dangerous. Maybe get a saw with a guard on it. And my dad, his response would always be, well, you can hurt yourself with any tool. And on the one hand, that's true. On the other hand, a circular saw without a guard on it, with, a cord that's held together by electrical tape, that was kind of a theme for him, like cords held together with electrical tape. Seems like you're way more likely to hurt yourself with that one than you might be with a new one you bought that has all the safety features that actually works right? You can hurt yourself with any tool, but some of them seem more likely to hurt you than others, right? I'll give you guys another example, slightly more obscure, but just, one of the things I like to do as a hobby is, I still like to take pictures with film, right? Black and white film. And it turns out there's a lot of ways you can develop black and white film. There's a list of chemicals as long as your arm that'll do it. And the way I tend to like to try to do it is to use stuff that's fairly safe. You're going to get this stuff on your hands. I wouldn't drink it, but Kodak still makes this stuff Xtol. The main ingredient is just vitamin C, right? Literally is. Has some other stuff in it. I would not drink it. I think that would be a terrible idea. You'd probably go into the hospital, but you get a little bit on your hands. It's fine. I have people I know, people always do this. They'll use these weird chemicals to develop film. And they'll say it has like these benefits. I don't know. And the thing they always say, it's like, well, okay, yes, you can't get this on your skin. Yes, you can't really be in a room breathing it. But if you have proper ventilation and you wear good chemical gloves, you can use Poisonol X, that's not actually the name of any of them, but whatever. You can use Poisonol and it's just fine. And I'm like, well, and they'll always say the same thing. My dad says, like, well, you can hurt yourself with any chemical. If you drank that Kodak stuff, wouldn't that be bad? And I'm like, yeah, that's true. But there's a big difference between a chemical that you wouldn't want to drink a bottle of it, but it's fine if you get a bit on your skin, and one that it's like, well, you get it on your skin, it's going to damage your liver. You can hurt yourself with any chemical. It's way easier to hurt yourself with some of this weird stuff people I know like to use. Pyrogalol is actually the name of the stuff, right? Anyway, way easier to hurt yourself or mess something up with that stuff than it is the stuff that's basically vitamin C with some other stuff in it. Yes, all chemicals are dangerous. Some are more dangerous than others. And the worry I have is that, yes, all moral theories can be misused. All moral theories could be dangerous in the wrong hands, but isn't maybe utilitarianism especially dangerous? And another thing I would push back on Mill, are scoundrels and monsters really our test case, right? If you were seeing how the Christian ethic plays out, don't look at some like corrupt medieval king who has his own agenda. Maybe look at people who are literal saints, right? St. Francis or somebody. What does the theory look like in the hands of a well-meaning, good, sincere person? And with utilitarianism, I wonder that even good, sincere people are led astray by it. I worry that it could do this. McCaskill is an example, but Mill is an even better example. Mill, from what I know about him, actually seems like a pretty admirable person. He was way ahead on a lot of issues. He was for the rights of women. He was not a racist. He was very much against people in his time who were racist, like this guy Carlyle. But Mill's biography has a very big stain on it. Mill's day job was working for the British East India Company. And the British East India Company was terrible. It was this colonial enterprise that came into India, conquered it, and basically just stole its resources to enrich itself. British East India Company was weird. Um, it wasn't actually sponsored by the British government. It was eventually taken over by the British government. It was just a corporation. The British East India Company taking over India would be like if we woke up tomorrow and lo and behold, Amazon was invading Mexico. It's a bizarre thing from human history. But Mill worked for the British East India Company. And he was a supporter of British colonialism more generally. And he thought it was a moral requirement. Mill was not a racist. He did not think that some people were biologically inferior to others. Unlike, I hasten to add, Nick Bostrom. You heard me say this guy's a creep. That's the reason I say he's a creep. But Mill was not in that group, right? Mill, especially for his day, this is pretty remarkable that he was very much not a racist. He did not think any group of people biologically superior or inferior to others. But Mill was very much a cultural, I don't know the right word here, chauvinist might be the weak word, but Mill thought that not that some culture, people were biologically superior to others, but he thought that some cultures were superior. And he thought that his own British culture was the most advanced in the world. And isn't it great that we're in India sharing our advanced culture with these people who he thought were more backwards? And the British East India Company was terrible. I mean, it basically just came in to steal, right? It stole, it starved people. And Mill, because he did this utilitarian calculation, he wasn't a stupid man. He wasn't he wasn't blind. He knew that the British East India Company did some bad stuff, but he's like, well, on the whole, yes, there's some unpleasantness, but the British East India Company, we're building roads, we're sharing British civilization. In the long term, that's going to be great for India, it's great for us, right? And I think Mill was able to tell himself this lie because he was a utilitarian. His utilitarianism allowed him to justify this, to not see what was right in front of his nose, right? After India, and during the British East India Company, it was India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, and I think even maybe a bit of Afghanistan were under their rule, right? They rebelled and tried to restore the Mughal emperor, and the British East India Company came in and just committed war crimes right and left. Even after this happened, Mill tried to defend the British East India Company, and tried to say we're on a civilizing mission, right? And Mill would never deny the unpleasantness, as he might have put it. He would admit the British East India Company did bad things, but he's like, well, on the whole, it's worth it even if there's some bad things now, because long term, we will share our, and I want you to put this in scare quotes, I do not believe this, Mill believes this, we will share our superior culture, and things will be so much better in the long term, even if there's some bad stuff now. And I think this is deeply unsettling, because I don't think John Stuart Mill was a bad person. And if utilitarianism can lead John Stuart Mill to support something as horrible and as blatantly exploitative as British colonialism in India, that does seem to me to be a problem for the theory. It does seem to suggest that it is especially dangerous, especially easy to misuse. We'll see this when we get to Kant and we talk about Kant on colonialism. I actually think, as people go, Kant was probably a less admirable person than John Stuart Mill in a lot of ways. Kant seems like just a fussy, bad-tempered old man. You can almost picture him like waving a cane at kids on his lawn, threatening to beat him. But Kant's moral theory, despite Kant's personal failings, which we will talk about, Kant's moral theory allowed him to see that colonialism was wrong in a way that Mill never did. And I think that's a point for something like Kantianism and against something like utilitarianism. We'll have to see how that plays out, but I do want to talk about this as we get more into this, toward, we go into the moral theories. So I don't think this is an entirely satisfying response from Mill, and I think Mill's own biography shows why it isn't.